It's time for the Saturday morning cup of coffee with Paul the Waterman. Now, here's Paul.
Good morning, and welcome to Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman on Northern Colorado's Voice, AM 1310 KFKA. So happy to be here with you today. Grab your cup of coffee, and because we're going to have a lot of good information that we're going to cover. I want to talk about well water filtration. Well water filtration is something I feel Water Pros specializes in. We have a lot of well water problems that we deal with. The first well water issue I want to discuss is people that have high iron content. So iron content is ferrous iron or clear water iron. That's the majority of the iron issues that we see that we run into. And with ferrous iron, clear water iron, just like hardness, as it oxidizes, the rust precipitates out of the water. And what you want to do, two things. One, shocking the well, adding chlorine content to well water, in my opinion, is never a good idea. The only time you should add chlorination to your well system is every time, if you have to change your well pump, because well pumps, unfortunately, don't last forever. Average lifespan, I think, of a well pump, is anywhere from 10 to 15 years. I know some folks, well pump are over 20 years old and still going strong, which is good, but rare in today's world. But anyway, that's the only time that we should chlorinate is when we're changing a well pump. And the chlorine they use is extremely, extremely strong. Now, chlorination is a short-term fix. So some people say, well, shock the well. Well, it may dilute the iron content. Remember, chlorine is an oxidizer. And because chlorine is an oxidizer, that's something that means it causes things to precipitate or settle out of the water. Eventually, the other thing on chlorination on the well, if I may hit real quick, a lot of people that have coliform bacteria issues, well, what do? Is they chlorinate the well. And so my opinion there is it's a short-term fix, and you're kind of not being truthful. If you're trying to sell the home, I've got bacteria, either E. coli or coliform bacteria, so I'm going to shock the well. And then you're going to get a negative test that says, hey, it's gone, the bacteria's gone. Well, it really isn't gone. Only thing you're doing is masking the problem. And eventually, whoever buys that property, if you're looking at a well water property and you know that they had to chlorinate the well because it tested positive for coliform bacteria or E. coli bacteria, you're going to want to insist that, further mitigation is done because, again, chlorination is just a short-term a solution for those kind of problems. Okay, so back at the topic of hand with well water and iron content. So with ferrous iron, you really want to do what we call a total compensated hardness test. And what total compensated hardness means is that you want to measure the hardness along with the iron content. Hardness is measured in a grain per gallon, and that grain per gallon measurement is solely for the purpose of setting up and properly programming your water filtration system or water softener. And with iron content, it's a different test, and it uses a iron, what we call a solution or powder that causes the iron to precipitate or oxidize out of that water, and it turns the water sample orange. And then you take a measurement, and iron is measured in either milligram per liter or part per million. So if I had 4 milligrams per liter or part per million of iron content to go along with 10 grains per gallon of hardness, our total compensated hardness number would be 26. I like taking that iron test reading and multiplying it by a factor of 4. And how you can treat iron is good old-fashioned ion exchange resin. However, we recommend at Water Pros, and what we find most effective is a dual tank water softener to achieve this. So any kind of single tank filtration system, when you have to use the same dirty water to backwash, you won't be effective at removing iron content. And there's three main iron filters that are used in the market today. One of them is berm. The second one is green sand. And there's a third where some people like to use ozone filtration. And now I'm thinking about there's a fourth one that's called, I think it's called a Pyrolux media. And at all four of those cases, I'm not a fan of ozone. Ozone requires high current, high electric current, and the byproduct of ozone is poison. And then you should have a backwashing carbon filter to support that. Now, any kind of single tank filtration system is going to use the same dirty water to backwash. So ozone is not foolproof. Ozone can oxidize the iron. The carbon filter is there to polish the water from the ozonator, but you also can get oxidized iron that will accumulate on that carbon. So the berm and green sand is a heavy filtration media. It's heavy, and what that means is we need to know what your flow rate is on your well. So water filtration isn't plug and play. And so when you're doing water filtration in a well, well water, it's important to understand how many, not only gallons per minute can your well produce. And so the flow rate. So remember in well water that water pressure and water flow rate are two different things. You need to have a minimum of 8 to 10 gallons per minute for a green sand or berm iron filter to operate properly. But because the media is so heavy, even at 8 to 10 gallons per minute, you're not agitating that filtration media. So berm and green sand can be anywhere between 70 to 100 pounds per cubic foot. So that means it's not going to agitate. It's not going to lift. So with water softening resin is extremely light. Resin beads are extremely light, and so during the backwashing process, especially when you use a dual tank water softener, you're taking soft water from one tank to backwash the other tank. And when you do that, then the resin lifts, agitates, and gets completely cleaned. So ion exchange resin removes the ferrous iron before it oxidizes. It removes the hardness before it oxidizes. And then you take clean water from one tank to backflush the other tank. And that's with that total compensated hardness number we just talked about. What you're doing is programming the system to backwash at a proper point so you don't get iron bleed through. So if you have extremely high iron content, sometimes it's better to have a dual tank system backwash once a day than it is based on usage. And when you have iron content, I used an example, I used the number of 4 part per million, but actually if you have iron content in well water that's over 1 part per million or above, then you really want your dual tank water softener to backwash probably every day, because as iron is in there and resin grabs it and we're flowing water, and then when you stop using water and water sets, guess what happens? With iron that high, iron can actually oxidize inside that tank. And once iron oxidizes and converts to a solid, then the resin can't help. The resin won't grab it. The resin won't trap it. So it's really important to measure the hardness level and the iron level so you get your total compensated hardness. And then it's really, important to pay attention to your iron level. So the water test is essential. Water testing in well water with high iron content, with hardness, is something that is absolute necessary. See, what can happen is think of the hard water as the paint and the iron as the dye or the pigment of the paint. So the hardness absolutely traps the iron. It can build up in layers, and then that can build up in the shower, builds up in the toilet bowl, and it makes it really difficult to remove. So with soft water 24/7, soft water will absolutely remove any existing hardness or any existing iron content buildup. And when we come out and we do the water analysis, we do the water test, and we get the iron measurement, and then we also look at the size of the home, how many bathrooms, the usage, and that also plays a part in determining how often the system needs to go through, a backwashing or a cleaning process. And that's where the water softening salt comes in. Water softening salt is your saline solution, and that's the rinsing agent for, a resin-based filtration system. The other filtration units systems that we talked about require high water flow And with high flow rates, and 9 times out of 10, that's something that people don't really pay attention to. Am I producing enough water where it can properly backwash these units? But then if I'm using the same dirty water to backwash, how effective am I really going to be? When you use the same dirty water and you're having iron content, as an issue, along with hardness, you can actually oxidize that iron during the backwashing process. And when you oxidize iron during the backwashing process, then it basically can build up through the media. And what it does is it traps and it goes to the bottom and it settles at the bottom of that filtration tank, right by the distribution tube for a filtration system. And then what can occur is a single tank iron filtration system can end up bleeding more iron content than what's actually coming out of the well. It becomes an accumulator. And we've seen this several times. You can go to waterpros.net and check out our well water page, and we have a picture of a control valve that's just covered in iron content. Okay, it's time to take our first time out, and we'll be right back. This is Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman. Welcome back. Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman here on Northern Colorado's voice of AM 1310 KFKA and FM 103.1. So we were talking about, well water filtration systems, especially those that have hardness and iron content. We were talking about the different types of filtration media that's available. I mentioned berm and green sand, and one of the things also I wanted to talk about real quick when it comes to berm and green sand, I want to talk about the acidic water. And water that's acidic can deteriorate and affect the berm and green sand. So actually it eats the coating on the green sand, and acidic water can eat the berm filtration media. And so, getting your acidic water, it's kind of funny, isn't it? Getting your acidic water tested is important, but what's kind of funny is that I can have hard water, I can have iron content, and my water can still be acidic. And that's due to the carbonation that's in our water. So Colorado is a mixed bag of nuts when it comes to water quality. Normally, acidic water would mean, hey, my water's empty, I don't have anything in it, but that's just not the case, especially here in Colorado. So when you do your water analysis, what we like to do is, well water, you test, number one, we do a TDS test, total dissolved solids, because it's important to see where your total dissolved solid number is for safe drinking water. We've several occasions where we've had the total dissolved solid number is greater than 500, and the EPA states anything that's over 500, it's unsafe to drink. So if you have a well water and you're thinking about selling your home, they'll do people that get an FHA loan, and some other, conventional loans will require a water test, but especially anything that's government sponsored. You're going to do a water test, and, the TDS could, say, hey, this is too high, it's not safe to drink. And then we do the hardness test, iron test, do the pH test, and some want a lead test, and then bacteria is, also standard in those testing. But with TDS, a high TDS number, the only way to remove that is with a point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system. And point of use reverse osmosis drinking water system is nanofiltration, so it will remove the TDS 99.99%. But again, it has to be supported. Reverse osmosis drinking water units have to be supported with soft water. And so that's important to do the water analysis, to do, the water hardness test, the iron test, the pH test. What happens if the water is acidic? So what you do with acidic water is you treat it with a calcite filter. But when you have high hardness and high iron content, you really need to put the calcite filter after the water softener, because iron content, and now a calcite filter, calcite is over 100 pounds per cubic foot. That means it's really heavy. Calcite is not going to lift in any kind of backwashing scenario whatsoever. When you have a control valve on a filtration system and you're using a heavy media, you have to take in consideration there's no amount of water pressure that's going to cause 75 to 100 pounds per cubic foot of filter media to rise, lift, or agitate. So the only thing you're doing basically is beating that down. So with iron content, we recommend an in and out calcite filter, 3/4 of a cubic foot, a mix of calcite and mag oxide. Calcite, if it's improper or if you have too much calcite, I've seen companies out there that want to put over 1 cubic foot to 2 cubic foot of calcite into somebody's home, and that's silly because the calcite is so heavy. You know what's going to happen? The calcite is going to solidify inside that tank. See, water is going to channel, and water is going to find its route through the calcite, and once that happens, the calcite then will solidify, and the calcite will become solid as a rock, and then you will not absorb the calcite. So if you folks out home, if you have a calcite filter, take a look at the calcite level. And if you've got over 1 cubic foot of calcite, I can guarantee you that calcite level is still the same. We use 3/4 of a cubic foot, and we mix it with mag oxide. So that seems to be enough where the calcite will, dissolve. And the weight of the water with the calcite won't oxidize or solidify. And if it doesn't oxidize or solidify, then you're getting it used properly. It's doing what it's supposed to. And so calcite is dissolved, and it actually adds up to 5 grains of hardness back to the water. So then the water is no longer aggressive. But if we're on problem water with, high hardness and iron content, if you put the calcite filter in first, only thing that's going to happen is that calcite filter is going to become an accumulator for the iron. The ferrous iron will oxidize inside that calcite tank, and it'll convert to a solid. And then you'll leach iron content, and it'll cause your dual tank water softener not to function. Because remember, water softening resin removes ferrous iron. But once the iron oxidizes, it converts to a solid, the resin won't stop it. And so then you'll have iron bleeding through to the dual tank softener, and then the dual tank softener will get contaminated with iron content, and it becomes a mess. And then the iron staining is right back where it was before you put in the filtration system. So you're going to want to put your calcite filter after a dual tank. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to take we're going to get rid of the original hardness and original iron, but then you're going to have minerals back in the water. So the water, basically after a filtration system with the calcite filter after the softener, will bleed about 5 grains of hardness. Now, some people, that's fine. Then what that means at 5 grains of hardness is hard water. But others will want super soft water, so then you have to put a polishing softener after. That's where you could put a small single tank unit that can handle the 5 grains of hardness, and then you'll have super soft water all day long. And so water treatment, again, isn't plug and play. It's important to understand what your hardness content, your iron content is, and it's also a good idea to understand, do I have acidic water? Especially in older homes, acidic water can leach the copper pipes. What acidic water does is eat at the copper pipes from the inside out. And if your home was built in the early 80s, late 1970s, most likely they used lead solder. So the acidic water can also leach the lead from the copper pipes as part of what the lead solder was used. So they don't use lead solder anymore today. And majority of homes now, use PEX pipe. PEX pipe, expansion PEX. And what they have also today with coppers, they have what we use crimp. They have copper joints that you have this nice little tool that crimps the copper pipes together. That way you don't have to worry about, sweating copper pipes, especially in an existing home. And the other thing, too, is that, folks, have you ever been to an existing home and you can see, copper pipes at the joint, you'd see a lot of corrosion. That came when they did the original sweating of the copper pipes. They might not have sanded the pipe down, clean, or they didn't clean it out and put enough flex. And then any copper shavings that were left over could also create that corrosion at that joint with copper pipes. So with well water filtration, it's something that, again, go to waterpros.net. We got some really great information, but we love specializing in problem water. And also, when we come back from our next break with well water, we also have uranium in the water. We have fluoride in the water. And so that's something that, we absolutely can help with at Water Pros. We use an aniline resin, and an aniline resin is ideal for removing uranium. It can remove fluoride, but uranium and fluoride, and also we want to talk about aniline resin. It's super sensitive. So aniline resin absolutely has to be treated or have pre-treatment water. It's not designed to work in hard water. Aniline resin is also, you don't want to mix aniline resin with cation resin. Aniline resin is something that is I think an effective filtration media because can remove fluoride out of the water supply. It can remove uranium out of the water supply. But with aniline resin, you also want to be able to, it operates and functions just like a water softener. So you also want to know what your levels are because the salt dosage for an aniline resin is just as important because if without the proper salt dosage, then you could be leaching and thinking that, I'm getting rid of all the uranium, but I'm not because I don't have enough detergent to clean the filter media. So again, water filtration is something you want to, take a look at the analysis of your water test and everything, that you have regarding water quality needs to play a part in, making the right recommendation for water treatment. You're listening to Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Saturday Morning Coffee. I'm Paul the Waterman, and thank you for being here. So we were talking about aniline resin now. So you could see well water could have various issues. Well water absolutely is something that, we can deal with hard water. We can deal with iron content. We can also have a coliform bacteria issue. We can have high uranium. We could have high fluoride content. And so uranium is something that we were mentioning before the break. We use an aniline resin system. But with aniline resin, because it's such a super sensitive media, what we want to do there is be able to, provide clean water to the aniline unit. So that could mean, okay, I need a dual tank water softener. Now, aniline resin can handle acidic water. So you could do your dual tank water softener to handle the hardness and iron. You could do your single tank aniline resin system to handle the uranium, the high fluoride content. And then if the water is acidic, you could put your calcite filter after. We have a situation where we helped a client out that had all three of those problems, hardness, iron, uranium, and they also had turbidity. Turbidity is floaty dirt. There's no acceptable allowed limit when it comes to turbidity because turbidity can carry in carcinogens, can carry in, bacteria. And so when you have floaty dirt in the water, turbidity, the only way to really filter that or remove that is with an ultrafilter, ultrafiltration. And ultrafiltration is a commercial reverse osmosis membrane that they basically pleed. And they make it, they actually slice it, and it allows high flow rate, but also then what it does is it's able to capture the floaty dirt or the turbidity. It's really effective. We have several ultrafilters in play. But again, like all other filtration systems, when you have problem water like that, the ultrafilter requires a source of clean water to rinse the filter media. So we hook up a 35-gallon pressure tank next to the ultrafilter. So the ultrafilter has a special valve assembly that takes clean water, filters out clean water, fills up that 35-gallon reservoir. So at the time of backwashing or a time of cleaning process, that ultrafilter then takes that clean ultrafiltered water to rinse the membranes. So ultrafiltration is what we recommend to remove turbidity. The other thing that we see that's becoming pretty popular regarding well water filtration is a large-scale whole house reverse osmosis system. Whole house reverse osmosis systems, like the ultrafilter, like anion resin, require soft, clean water to function properly. Remember this, reverse osmosis membranes, whether it's a point of use underneath your kitchen sink or the whole house, are not designed to be primary filtration source. Reverse osmosis membranes absolutely need soft water to function properly. Hard water will build up and cause a membrane not to absorb. It can burn out a pump. And what that means is commercial reverse osmosis units have a 1.5 horse or 1 horse pump that forces the water through the membrane. So that's how we get that 1 to 1.5 gallon production rate from an RO. And when you force hard water through the membrane, and this is something I believe I mentioned last week regarding the bottled water industry, what happens with an RO system is if it has to deal with dirty water, the iron content, the hardness is going to plug up that membrane, and the membrane then is not going to, filter as designed, but then with that pump, you're forcing the water through that plugged up membrane. Well, you're going to also burn out your pump, and the pump is on the, commercial reverse osmosis system, and you're going to cause that to have a short lifespan. We ran into that exact situation with the home on well water. Their filtration system wasn't working properly, so the pump was pushing the water through the commercial reverse osmosis membrane, but it ended up burning out the pumps because pumps are not designed to push against resistance. Your well pump, any kind of RO filtration, commercial RO pump, well pumps or water pumps are not designed to push against resistance. And when they meet resistance, the pumps will burn out. And that's exactly what happened with the commercial RO system we were working with. The pump burned out. The membrane was plugged. So reverse osmosis membranes, and for them to function properly, and, on a side note, we've seen a lot of systems out there that are, have whole house reverse osmosis systems with no pretreatment. And you can see the evidence. You can see the calcium, the hard water, the iron content start to precipitate out of that membrane housing. So the membrane, an RO membrane is put in a stainless steel housing. Commercial RO membranes are in a stainless steel housing, which are basically secured, and that RO membrane has no choice. It can't go anywhere because of that stainless steel housing. So the water pump forces the water through the membrane. The membrane says, I can't absorb this. Then it starts getting plugged, and then the pump pushes against resistance, and then you burn out the pump. But then the quality of water that you have as well, I've seen a scenario where you see iron content coming from a reverse osmosis in that holding tank. If you have a holding tank and you have high iron content, clearly, that membrane isn't doing what it's supposed to do. But if you take soft water and you support a commercial reverse osmosis system with soft water, and then what you're achieving is two things. The best possible quality water for you and your family, you're removing all the unwanted contaminants, and then the longevity of the filtration system. So commercial reverse osmosis units, like anion resin, like an ultrafilter, it all starts with soft water. Soft water, and also soft water that's free from iron content. Hard water is a liquid called calcium carbonate, and calcium carbonate will oxidize. So when your commercial reverse osmosis unit isn't functioning and it's setting idle, any hardness content or iron content is going to oxidize inside that membrane housing. And once that happens, you're turning, calcium carbonate into a scale. And that scale will build up on the RO membrane. Same with iron content. Any iron content that's in the water that will oxidize inside of a reverse osmosis membrane, and it will build up inside that housing. And once that happens, then you're putting pressure inside that RO membrane, and you're going to also rip that RO membrane, so you're not going to get the nanofiltration that it's designed for. And then that's when you'll get your cross-contamination, and you'll see it in the holding tank especially. You'll see the hardness build up in your kitchen sink, in the faucets and fixtures. But more importantly, if you have iron in the water, you're absolutely going to see the iron content in the water as well. Same, when you're looking at problem water, it's a good idea to, again, get the water tested, figure out, what kind of water issues you have, and then we can sit down at Water Pros and design the right filtration system for you. A commercial reverse osmosis unit for a whole house RO is also ideal if you have high TDS. So high TDS stands for total dissolved solids, and anything that's over 500 on total dissolved solids would be unsafe to drink. The EPA has a limit of 500, so 500 of above would be red flagged. And we talked about, if you're trying to sell your home, that could be an issue, for the buyers that say, hey, listen, you have to fix this problem. With a point of use reverse osmosis unit, you can get by short term without any water treatment, but eventually the hardness and the iron content will plug up that membrane, and then point of use reverse osmosis system, the membrane will swell in, the system will stop producing water. So let's take our break here, and when we get back, we'll kind of recap what we talked about. This is Saturday Morning Coffee with Paul the Waterman on Northern Colorado's Voice, 103.1 and AM 1310. This is KFKA. Welcome back to Saturday Morning Coffee. I'm Paul the Waterman. Thank you for being here. So what we really talked about this morning is, well water, iron content, hardness content. We recommend a dual tank water softener. And then if we have other issues, it really starts with having a dual tank water softener being able to support any additional filtration system that you have. Based upon how much iron content you have will determine how often we need to have the dual tank water softener go through a cleaning cycle. We also talked about single tank filtration system and other filtration media out there for iron content on well, and one of them we talked about was berm and green sand. However, if the water is acidic, berm and green sand will not be effective. And the other issue with those types of systems is they're heavy. So, when you have a system that needs to go through a cleaning cycle, and you're on well water and you're at 7 gallons per minute or less, you're not going to create enough water pressure that's really going to cause that filtration system to properly be cleaned. And what I mean is that if you have berm and green sand, and because it's a heavy media and it won't lift during the cleaning cycle, and I'm using the same dirty water to go through the backwashing cycle, what do you think is going to happen during that process? Your iron actually will oxidize during the backwashing cycle. So if I'm using dirty water and I'm trying to rinse off my green sand or berm media, what you're doing is you're creating iron during that agitation process, but then iron content on green sand or berm basically collects. It settles. Have you seen those filters? And you may have this at home. If you see a berm or green sand filter that has a little aerator on the back of the control valve. So what the theory is there is that they're actually going to oxidize the iron as it comes into your home. But the problem is it doesn't work that fast. You actually don't oxidize that iron that fast at all. And what the true filtration happens with the green sand or berm filter is when the water sets. That's when the iron oxidizes inside that holding tank. So when I turn the water on and I'm running it through a control valve, and that control valve has a little air injector that is supposed to intake air as you're running the water through the home, you will not instantaneously oxidize that iron. It won't happen. Absolutely will not happen. The problem is that when you shut the faucet off and the water sits in those tanks, that's when the iron actually will oxidize. And then when you turn the water back on, that oxidized iron is sitting at the top of the filtration media. And over a period of time, only thing you're doing really is working that iron to the bottom of that filtration media, to the bottom of that tank, and then it settles at that distributor tube. And that's when you get that high iron bleed through. If you have a single tank iron filter and you pull the lid off the back of the toilet tank and you look inside there, you'll definitely see heavy iron content, heavy iron bleed through, heavy iron build up. So that's what happens is that iron does not oxidize instantaneously on those types of filtration systems. It doesn't happen. And eventually the iron, as the water sets, it's going to oxidize because it's setting. That's where the air comes in and it sets. So then the iron comes out of solution and it sets, and it's going to build up all over that media tank. But with a dual tank resin-based water softener, what you're doing is resin is removing the iron content as it filters through the filtration media. It removes it before it oxidizes, just like water hardness. Resin is amazing. Water softening resin was developed in the late 1890s, I believe, in Germany. And it removes ferrous iron, which is clear water iron, and calcium carbonate, which is hardness. Now, what you have to do is you have to measure your iron content, and based upon the amount of iron that you have, determines how often a dual tank water softener needs to go through a cleaning cycle. See, a dual tank water softener, standard dual tank water softener size should be about 32,000 grains or 1 cubic foot. Anything bigger than that, then you're going to fail because you won't program it to backwash properly. I think a 32,000 gallon water softener is the sweet spot with problem water, because when you have problem water with high iron content, you want it to backwash a little more. You want it to turn over more often, so you're ensured that you're getting all the iron and you're not having any iron bleed through. This will cause you to go through the water softening salt, absolutely. But water softening salt is the detergent, and it's important with iron to backwash it before that iron oxidizes inside that tank. So what I was mentioning, the problem with a single tank iron system, what can happen in a single tank iron system can happen in a water softener, and a dual tank water softener especially. If it's not rinsed enough, then once that iron oxidizes, then we have a problem. Then we're going to get the iron bleed through. See, even a single tank water softener with resin, a single tank water softener on a well water application, the rule of thumb is that you have to be under a half part per million for a single tank softener to even have a chance. But I say any kind of iron content on a well water system with a single tank water softener will not function properly, because during the backwashing process, again, if I'm using the same dirty water that to go through the cleaning cycle, and we have iron in the water, then I'm going to have iron, oxidized during the backwashing process. And when that happens and you get oxidized iron in a single tank system, it's game over. Iron will take it over and it'll build up, and we'll have that same. You can have soft water. The water will be soft, but you're going to have iron, rusty water all over the place. And with a point of use reverse osmosis system, the lifespan of an RO membrane, a point of use RO membrane, is cut down tremendously by any amount of iron whatsoever. I've even seen scenarios where iron content has caused water from a point of use reverse osmosis system to have an odor. And iron content, definitely those who have it, they smell it. And iron content also, people can think, maybe I have, hydrogen sulfide or sulfur in my water, but it's not. It's just high iron content. And if you have iron content, it builds up in the pipes, it builds up in layers, it builds up in the hot water heater. It can, plug your aerator. The effective way to remove it is, through through a dual tank, resin-based water softener. It's important to, again, make sure that we do a proper water analysis, and getting your iron test done correctly, too, is important. I've seen a lot of scenarios where the iron test was not done properly, so you had an incorrect measurement, so the system wasn't programmed properly. We'll be more than happy, to come out. If you have an existing well water system and you'd like for us to, get a second opinion on the programming, if it's set up properly, visit us at waterpros.net. We'll be more than happy to come out and check it out for you. One last thing to talk about, I mentioned, regarding chlorination of wells. So chlorine, again, is a short-term solution. No matter what problem you have, chlorine it does not permanently fix a problem. So, especially if you have a bacteria scenario, chlorine will absolutely, if you shock your well, you run a sample and you submit it, it's going to say, hey, the bacteria is gone. Well, it's really not gone. The only thing we've done is mask it because of the high chlorine content. So that's something to, take in consideration. And if you've got a bacteria issue, that's something that, where's the source coming from? It's just bacteria in well water, just something doesn't occur. Bacteria, coliform bacteria is a precursor to E. coli bacteria. Coliform bacteria can also occur if there's, a lot of vegetation in that well. So that can be a source. So it's easy to think, hey, shock the well and that'll fix it, but it's not. Especially when you have iron content and you shock the well. I've seen scenarios where after the chlorine dissipates, you have higher iron content than you did before you shocked the well. And then with bacteria, you clean bacteria with an ultraviolet light, but an ultraviolet light is also ultraviolet filtration, also requires soft, iron-free water for it to function properly. So it really all starts on getting your well water tested, see what the hardness test is, see what the iron test, treat that, and then any other filtration that's needed, 9 times out of 10 has to be supported by soft water. And we've talked about an anion resin system for uranium, for fluoride, and also, reverse osmosis systems. And then if you need an ultraviolet light, ultraviolet lights will absolutely function better if you do it with soft water, because that ultraviolet bulb, if the crystal quartz sleeve has shadows, and the shadows occur with calcium and iron buildup, then the bacteria will pass on through. Remember, a UV bulb sterilizes the bacteria. It doesn't kill it. It sterilizes it, and then bacteria dies off. So, well, listen, thank you for being with me today. I appreciate it. This has been Saturday Morning Coffee. I'm Paul the Waterman. Everybody enjoy your Saturday afternoon and keep it here on AM 1310 KFKA.